A cry for help. The morning sun painted soft streaks of gold across the manicured lawns of Willowbrook, a peaceful suburban enclave just outside Chicago. The early air was crisp, filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and the distant aroma of brewed coffee from nearby homes. Birds chirped their morning songs, and the occasional bark of a dog echoed through the quiet streets. Marcus James took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air expand in his chest. He had always found solace in his morning runs. It was his ritual, a way to clear his mind before the day's inevitable challenges. Even now, at 40, his military habits remained ingrained, his morning routine was precise, his movements efficient, his mind always alert. After spending years serving as a Marine, then as a high-level security consultant, Marcus had learned that being prepared wasn't just a skill, it was survival. And though he had traded war zones for corporate boardrooms, some battles still followed him. Prejudice, suspicion, the ever-present weight of being watched in places he had every right to be. Willowbrook had seemed like a fresh start, a town that advertised itself as progressive, welcoming, and inclusive. But Marcus had quickly learned that inclusion often had limits. He had lost count of the wary glances, the polite but distant greetings, the way certain neighbors seemed to find an urgent need to check their phone whenever he passed by. Still, he pushed forward, just as he had always done. His feet pounded against the pavement in a steady rhythm as he jogged down Sycamore Lane, passing neatly trimmed hedges and towering oak trees. He nodded at an older man picking up his newspaper, who responded with a hesitant smile. A woman walking her golden retriever gave him a curt nod before quickly crossing the street. Marcus smirked. Some things never changed. As he approached Crestwood Park, his pace slowed slightly. The park was his favorite part of the route, a wide, open space with a pond reflecting the early morning sky, a playground tucked into the corner, and winding trails that stretched beyond the tree line. It was nearly empty at this hour, just the way he liked it. A few joggers passed by, headphones in, lost in their own worlds. A couple sat on a bench near the pond, sipping coffee. Then, just as he rounded a bend near the playground, he heard it. A sharp, gut-wrenching cry. Marcus's steps faltered. He stopped, listening. Another sob. High-pitched. Desperate. A child. His body tensed instinctively. He scanned the area, his trained eyes searching for the source of the sound. A small figure sat on a bench near the playground, her tiny shoulders trembling as she cried into her hands. A little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6, dressed in a light blue dress with pink sneakers. Her light brown hair was pulled into 2 messy pigtails, and she clutched a well-worn stuffed bear against her chest. Marcus glanced around the park. No frantic parents. No one looking for a missing child. His first instinct was to keep moving. He had learned, sometimes the hard way, that the sight of a black man near a vulnerable white child could lead to problems that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with perception. But something about the way the little girl sobbed, so raw, so frightened, made his chest tighten. She was alone. Completely alone. Damn it. He exhaled slowly, stepping forward with deliberate caution, making sure to keep his hands visible and his voice soft. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said, stopping a few feet away. "Are you okay?" The girl gasped and looked up, her tear-streaked face pale and wide-eyed. Marcus immediately took a step back, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "It's all right," he assured her. "I just heard you crying. Thought you might need some help." She sniffled, rubbing her sleeve across her nose. I lost my mommy." Her lower lip trembled, and fresh tears welled in her green eyes. "We were walking, and I stopped to look at a puppy. When I turned around, she was gone." Marcus kept his posture relaxed. "That sounds scary. Do you remember where you last saw her?" The girl hiccuped. "Back there, near the big tree. But I don't know where that is now." Marcus followed her pointing finger toward the other end of the park, near a wooded trail. Still no sign of a panicked mother searching for her daughter. Something about the situation felt off. "Okay," he said, keeping his voice calm. "We'll figure this out. My name's Marcus. What's yours?" The girl hesitated before whispering, "Emma." "All right, Emma. Do you know your mom's phone number?" Emma shook her head. "She told me not to talk to strangers." Marcus huffed a quiet laugh. "That's a good rule. But I promise, I just want to help you find her." Emma looked down at her stuffed bear, her small fingers gripping it tightly. For a moment, Marcus considered his options. The safest move, for himself, would be to flag down another adult, a woman preferably, and let them handle it. But that would mean walking away from a terrified child. He couldn't do that. Not when he knew exactly what it felt like to be lost. "All right," he said, glancing toward the park entrance. "How about we walk that way? Maybe we'll find her." Emma hesitated before nodding. Marcus took a careful step back, gesturing for her to walk ahead. He kept a respectful distance, making sure she felt safe. As they walked, he kept scanning the park, expecting to see a mother frantically searching for her daughter. Still nothing. That uneasy feeling returned. Before he could dwell on it, a voice shattered the air like a gunshot. "Emma." A woman's voice. Sharp. Panicked. Marcus turned just in time to see a woman sprinting toward them, her red hair wild, her face twisted in terror. Emma gasped. "Mommy." Marcus took a step back, relieved. But his relief was short-lived. The woman's eyes locked onto him, her face contorting in rage. "Get away from my daughter," she screamed. And just like that, everything changed, accusations and assumptions. The moment the woman's voice cut through the air, Marcus knew things were about to go south. He had seen that look before. Fear, shock, and something uglier lurking beneath, suspicion. Emma's mother stormed toward them, her chest rising and falling with frantic breaths. Her green eyes darted between her daughter and Marcus, wild with panic. Emma, still gripping her stuffed bear, took a small step toward her mother, her relief evident. But the woman wasn't looking at Emma anymore. Her gaze was locked onto Marcus, her expression shifting from fear to fury. "Step away from my daughter," she screamed. Marcus instinctively lifted his hands, palms out, the universal sign of non-aggression. His heart pounded, not from guilt, because he had done nothing wrong, but from the gut-deep awareness of how fast situations like this could spiral. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his voice steady and low, "I was just trying to help. I found her alone on the bench, crying. She said she was lost." The woman wasn't listening. She rushed forward, snatching Emma into her arms, holding her so tightly that the little girl let out a soft whimper. "Mommy," Emma murmured, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. He was nice. But her mother wasn't hearing her. She was too busy glaring at Marcus, her body shielding her daughter as though he were a threat. "You were helping?" Her voice dripped with disbelief. "A grown man, a stranger, standing alone with my little girl? Do you think I'm stupid?" Marcus exhaled sharply. He had been in plenty of tense situations, war zones, high-stakes negotiations, moments where life and death were decided in a split second. But nothing could prepare him for the suffocating weight of being judged guilty simply for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. "I understand why you're upset," Marcus said, forcing himself to remain calm. "But I didn't approach her with bad intentions. I heard her crying, I looked around, and when I saw no one else was helping, I stepped in. That's all." The woman's face flushed red. "You expect me to believe that?" Marcus clenched his jaw, biting back the sharp response that wanted to surface. He had learned long ago that anger never helped in situations like these. It only made people like her more convinced they were right. But before he could speak, another voice entered the conversation. "Everything all right here?" Marcus turned to see a police officer striding toward them, his blue uniform crisp, his belt heavy with gear. He was young, late 20s, maybe, with a lean build and sharp blue eyes that flicked between Marcus and the woman. Of course. Someone must have seen the confrontation and called the cops. The officer came to a stop, his posture casual but watchful. "Ma'am," he addressed the woman, tilting his head in question. The woman pointed at Marcus, her voice trembling. "This man was alone with my daughter when I found them. She was crying, and he was standing over her." The officer's expression shifted slightly. He turned to Marcus, studying him with the same cautious gaze. "Sir, is that true?" Marcus inhaled deeply, keeping his hands visible. "I was jogging. I heard her crying. She told me she was lost, and I was trying to help." The officer's expression didn't change. "So, you didn't touch her?" Marcus stiffened. He shouldn't have to defend himself for showing basic human kindness. But he also knew that if he responded the way he wanted to, with frustration, indignation, things could escalate in a way that wouldn't end well for him. "No," Marcus said evenly. "I kept my distance. I asked if she knew her mom's number, but she didn't. So, I suggested we walk toward the entrance in case her mother was looking for her. That's it." Emma, still clinging to her mother, finally found her voice. "He didn't do anything bad, Mommy. He was nice." But the woman wasn't listening. The officer, however, was. His gaze lingered on Marcus for a moment before he nodded slightly. "All right. Sir, can I see some identification?" Marcus exhaled through his nose. "Am I being detained?" The officer hesitated. "Not exactly. But given the nature of the situation." "The situation?" Marcus repeated, his voice clipped. "You mean a black man stopping to help a lost child?" The officer's jaw tightened. "Sir, this isn't about race." Marcus let out a humorless chuckle. "Isn't it?" The officer didn't answer. Marcus could feel the tension in the air, thick as a storm cloud. He glanced at the park entrance, where a few onlookers had gathered, watching with thinly veiled curiosity. This is how it happens, he thought bitterly. This is how good men get accused of terrible things. Marcus let out a slow breath, reaching into the pocket of his running shorts with deliberate slowness. He pulled out his wallet and handed over his driver's license. The officer glanced at it, then frowned slightly. "Marcus James. Are you the same Marcus James that works for Westbrook Industries?" Marcus arched a brow. "Yes." Now the officer's expression changed. There was a flicker of recognition. "The same Marcus James who used to work for Homeland Security?" Marcus crossed his arms. "That would be me." The officer's stance relaxed slightly. "I've heard of you." He handed back the ID. "My cousin worked security detail for Governor Callaway a few years back. Said you ran a tight ship." Marcus nodded, but he didn't let his guard down. The officer turned back to Emma's mother, his tone more measured. "Ma'am, it looks like this was just a misunderstanding. Mr. James has an extensive background in security. I don't believe he meant any harm." The woman's face twisted, caught between lingering fear and growing embarrassment. She looked down at Emma, who was still watching Marcus with wide eyes. The woman started, but faltered. Marcus didn't wait for an apology. He had been through this enough times to know one wasn't coming. Instead, he turned back to the officer. "Am I free to go?" The officer hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir." Marcus gave Emma a small, reassuring smile before turning and walking away, his pulse still hammering in his ears. As he jogged back toward his house, his mind raced. He had done the right thing. He knew that. And yet, he had almost been branded a criminal for it. Maybe moving to Willowbrook hadn't been the fresh start he had hoped for after all. But what he didn't know was that this was only the beginning. Because before the day was over, the entire town would know exactly who he was. And so would Emma's mother. The storm breaks. Marcus ran harder than usual on his way back home. The steady rhythm of his feet pounding against the pavement was the only thing keeping his frustration in check. This wasn't the first time he'd been accused of something just for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And deep down, he knew it wouldn't be the last. Still, something about this one stung. Maybe it was the look in Emma's eyes, so trusting, so untainted by the prejudices that gripped the world around her. Or maybe it was the way the mother had refused to listen, refusing to hear even her own daughter's voice. By the time Marcus reached his house, sweat slicked his skin, but the tight knot in his chest hadn't loosened. His home was a modest but well-kept two-story brick house in a quiet cul-de-sac, nestled between neatly trimmed lawns and flower beds. He had moved here to escape the noise of the city, hoping for peace. Now, he wasn't sure if peace was even possible. As he reached for his keys, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Pulling it out, he saw the name on the screen and sighed. Jason Reynolds. Jason was an old friend and one of the few people Marcus still kept in close contact with from his military days. Now, Jason worked as the personal security director for Governor Calloway, one of the most influential political figures in the state. Marcus answered. "Hey, man," Jason's voice came through, sharp and alert. "You okay?" Marcus frowned. "Yeah." "Why?" There was a brief pause. "Because your name's already floating around, and not in a good way." Marcus's grip on the phone tightened. "What are you talking about?" Jason exhaled. Some woman posted on a community forum saying a suspicious man was lurking in the park and approached her daughter. She didn't name you, but people are already spreading it around. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Damn it. He shouldn't have been surprised. In the age of social media, it only took one false accusation to ruin a man's life. "I didn't do anything wrong," Marcus said, his voice tight. "I know that," Jason said, his tone serious. "But these things can spiral. You need to get ahead of it." Marcus rubbed his forehead. He had spent years handling security crises, analyzing risks, and predicting threats. But he never thought he'd be caught in one himself, especially over something so ridiculous. "You think it's going to get worse?" Marcus asked. There was another pause. Then Jason said, "You know how these things go. And if people figure out who you are, they're going to start digging." Marcus's stomach tightened. Jason wasn't just talking about his work history. He was talking about the classified missions, the government contracts, and the people Marcus had protected, people who weren't supposed to be public knowledge. "I appreciate the heads up," Marcus finally said. "Keep your head down," Jason warned. "And if you need backup, you know who to call." Marcus nodded, even though Jason couldn't see him. "Yeah," he muttered. "I know. The first signs of trouble." By the time Marcus showered and sat down with a cup of coffee, the first real signs of trouble had already begun. His phone buzzed with a message from Jordan Bailey, a fellow security consultant. "Jordan, you might want to check the neighborhood Facebook group." Marcus groaned. He barely used Facebook, but this didn't sound good. Opening the app, he found the post within seconds. Becky L. posted 37 minutes ago. Warning. A suspicious man was in Lakeside Park today, standing way too close to my daughter. When I arrived, he was talking to her, and she looked scared. Parents, please be vigilant. You never know who's lurking around. Below the post, the comments were already piling up. Debbie S., OMG, that's terrifying. Did you call the cops? James M., disgusting. We need more patrols in the area. Linda B., I saw someone sketchy there yesterday too. Could be the same guy. Matt R., if I catch some creep near my kid, I'm handling it myself. Marcus set his coffee down. So this is how it starts. No details. No facts. Just fear and assumptions. He debated whether to reply. Defending himself would probably make things worse. But then a new comment popped up. Elizabeth R., wait. Are we sure about this? I think that guy might be Marcus James. If so, he's ex-military. A security consultant. He's not some random creep. Another comment followed almost immediately. Maggie T., Marcus? If it's the same guy I met at the HOA meeting, he's a good dude. This might be a misunderstanding. For a moment, Marcus felt a flicker of relief. But then. Becky L., original poster, I don't care who he is. Just because someone was in the military doesn't mean they're safe. I know what I saw. Marcus clenched his jaw. It didn't matter. To people like her, the truth didn't matter. The knock on the door. An hour later, Marcus was reviewing a security report on his laptop when a knock sounded at his door. He glanced up, expecting a delivery. But when he checked his security camera feed, his stomach sank. 2 uniformed officers stood at his doorstep. He sighed heavily. Here we go. Marcus took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and opened the door. The older officer, Sergeant Harris, gave him a neutral look. The younger one, Officer Larkin, shifted uncomfortably. Mr. James? Harris asked. That's me, Marcus said. Harris nodded. We just have a few questions about an incident in Lakeside Park this morning. Marcus crossed his arms. I already spoke to an officer at the park. Is this necessary? Harris gave him a measured look. We received a second complaint. The woman in question feels unsafe. Marcus exhaled sharply. Unsafe? Because I helped her lost daughter? Still, he kept his tone even. Am I being accused of something? Larkin hesitated. Not officially. We just want to clear things up. Marcus glanced between them. He could push back, demand a lawyer, refuse to answer anything. But that would only make things worse. So, he nodded. Fine. Ask away. The unraveling. The questioning didn't last long. Marcus repeated what he had already told the officer at the park. Eventually, Harris seemed satisfied. All right, Mr. James. No further action will be taken at this time. At this time. Marcus didn't like the sound of that. The officers left, and Marcus closed the door, running a hand down his face. He needed to call Jason again. Because something told him this wasn't over. And he was right. By that evening, the story had spread. And when Emma's mother finally learned who Marcus really was, who he had worked for, her entire world shifted. But by then, it was too late. When the truth comes knocking. The tension in Marcus's chest hadn't eased since the officers left. Even though he had done nothing wrong, he knew how quickly things could spiral. He had seen it before, innocent people dragged through the mud simply because someone with influence decided they were guilty. His military training had taught him to stay ahead of threats, and right now, this situation was a threat. He needed to do something about it. A call for help. Marcus paced his living room before finally grabbing his phone and dialing a number. Jason picked up immediately. You again? Jason's voice held a note of dry amusement. Let me guess, things got worse. Marcus exhaled. Cops came to my door. Jason's tone hardened. They arrest you? No, Marcus said. But they said Emma's mom feels unsafe. Jason cursed under his breath. This isn't just some suburban hysteria. Someone's pushing this harder than they should. Marcus frowned. You think someone's behind it? I don't believe in coincidences, Jason replied. Someone with influence is making sure this sticks. Marcus's gut twisted. Westbrook Industries, the company he worked for, was connected to some powerful people. And while he had kept a low profile, anyone determined enough could find out just who he had worked for before. If they were digging into his past, things could get bad. Fast. I need to find out who's behind this, Marcus said. Jason was quiet for a beat. Then. I'll make some calls. Meanwhile, in the suburbs. Becky Langston sat at her kitchen table, typing furiously on her laptop. She had just finished writing a detailed post in the neighborhood group about how certain individuals posed a danger to children. She didn't name Marcus directly, but everyone knew who she was talking about. And that was the point. She took a sip of her coffee, satisfied. Her husband, David, walked into the kitchen, frowning at her. Becky, are you seriously still on this? Becky turned to him, indignant. A strange man was near our daughter, David. He could have taken her. David sighed, rubbing his temple. Emma keeps saying he helped her. You need to let this go. Becky's expression hardened. You weren't there. You didn't see the way he looked at her. David sat down across from her. No, I wasn't there. But I know who he is. You're attacking the wrong man. Becky blinked. What do you mean? David hesitated. Marcus James isn't just some random guy. He's ex-military. Special forces. High-level security. Becky scoffed. So? Just because someone was in the military doesn't mean. David cut her off. He's not just a veteran, Becky. He's worked for government agencies. I looked him up. He was a personal security officer for senators, CEOs, and even foreign diplomats. The man has a classified work history. For the first time, Becky felt a twinge of doubt. But, she started. David shook his head. You need to stop before this gets out of hand. If this backfires, it won't just be embarrassing. It could be dangerous. Becky swallowed. Dangerous? David leaned forward. Do you really want to be on the wrong side of a man like that? The story spreads. The next morning, Marcus woke up to hundreds of messages. His phone had blown up overnight. He scrolled through them, his jaw tightening. The local news had picked up the story. Mother warns community of suspicious man in park. A concerned mother in Lakeside Heights has issued a warning about an unknown man who approached her daughter at a local park. While no charges have been filed, police were called to investigate. The man in question has not been publicly identified. Marcus's stomach churned. They hadn't used his name, but everyone knew. His inbox was full of texts from co-workers, neighbors, and old friends. Some were supportive. Others were not. Then, his phone rang. An unknown number. Marcus hesitated before answering. Mr. James, a deep, unfamiliar voice said. Who's asking? Marcus said. This is Detective Barnes from the state attorney's office. I'd like to speak with you. Marcus's pulse quickened. About what? I'd rather discuss it in person. Marcus exhaled slowly. Fine. Where and when? The meeting. Later that afternoon, Marcus pulled up to a quiet government building on the outskirts of the city. Detective Barnes was waiting for him inside, an older man with graying hair and sharp eyes. They sat across from each other in a small, dimly lit office. I won't waste your time, Mr. James, Barnes said. This case isn't going anywhere legally. There's no evidence of wrongdoing. Marcus waited. But? Barnes folded his hands. But someone with influence wants to make your life difficult. Marcus's jaw clenched. Who? Barnes sighed. Can't say for sure. But my guess? This isn't about the park incident anymore. This is about your past. Marcus stiffened. Barnes studied him. I don't know what you've been involved in before, Mr. James. But whatever it was, someone doesn't want you here. Marcus leaned back, his mind racing. Someone wanted him gone. And now, they were using a false accusation to do it. The last straw. That night, Marcus was in his kitchen when he heard the sound. A thud against his front door. His instincts kicked in. Gun? No, too extreme. Instead, he grabbed the baton he kept by the door and peered through the peephole. A brick lay on his doorstep. Wrapped around it? A note. Marcus picked it up, unfolding the paper. Leave. His pulse slowed. Not from fear. From anger. They thought he would run. They thought they could scare him. They had no idea who they were messing with. He grabbed his phone and dialed Jason. Yeah? Jason answered. They made a mistake, Marcus said, his voice ice cold. Jason paused. What happened? Marcus stared at the note. They just made this personal. And whoever was behind it? They were about to find out exactly who Marcus James really was. The hunter becomes the hunted. Marcus sat in his dimly lit living room, staring at the brick and the note in his hands. His mind was eerily calm. Threats were nothing new to him. He had spent years working in war zones, protecting diplomats, CEOs, and high-ranking officials from real danger. This was amateur work. But that didn't mean he was going to ignore it. Whoever was behind this clearly underestimated him. And that was their mistake. A call to action. He picked up his phone and called Jason. Jason answered on the first ring. Tell me you have something. Marcus exhaled. I was right. Someone's pushing this. And now, they're getting bold. Bold how? Marcus looked at the brick on his table. They left me a message. Silence. Then Jason's voice dropped. How bad? Marcus read the note again. A single word, leave. Jason cursed under his breath. All right. That changes things. We need to go on offense. Marcus nodded. I need you to trace the cops who came to my door. Someone sent them. And I need to know who. Jason was already typing. Got it. Anything else? Marcus leaned back. I need a name, Jason. The person behind this. Jason was quiet for a second. That might take a little digging. Marcus's voice was cold. Then start digging. Meanwhile, Becky Langston paced her kitchen, chewing on her nails. Ever since her husband, David, told her who Marcus really was, she had felt uneasy. At first, she had been furious that he wasn't taking her side. But now? Now, she was starting to wonder if she had made a mistake. Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it, her breath catching when she saw the name. Unknown caller. Her hands trembled as she answered. Hello? A deep, distorted voice spoke. We need to meet. Becky's throat went dry. What? Why? You started this, the voice said. Now, you need to finish it. A chill ran down Becky's spine. This wasn't about her anymore. She had poked a bear she didn't understand. And now? Now, she wasn't sure if she could stop what was coming. The setup. Marcus didn't sleep that night. By morning, Jason had a name. Terry Larkin. Marcus frowned. Who the hell is Terry Larkin? Jason sent him a file. Ex-cop. Now works private security for some of Westbrook's top executives. And guess who has a close relationship with him? Marcus opened the file. His stomach twisted. Becky Langston's father. Marcus exhaled. Of course. Jason's voice was grim. My guess? Becky ran her mouth to her father. He mentioned it to the wrong people, and Larkin saw an opportunity. Marcus clenched his jaw. They want me gone. Jason sighed. Yeah. And they're willing to play dirty. Marcus closed his eyes. He had two options. Leave. Give in to their threats. Let them win. Fight back. Expose them. Make them regret ever coming after him. For Marcus, there was only one real choice. Setting the trap. That evening, Marcus parked his car 2 blocks away from Larkin's office. He had no doubt Larkin was the one pulling the strings. And if Larkin wanted him out of Lakeside Heights, then Marcus was going to pay him a visit. He entered the building through the back, undetected. Years of military training made slipping past security second nature. He found Larkin's office on the 3rd floor. The door was locked. Marcus smirked. Amateurs. A few seconds with his lock-picking set, and he was inside. The office was dark, but Marcus didn't need much light. He moved quickly and efficiently, searching through Larkin's files. Then, he found it. A folder labeled M. James sat on the desk. Marcus flipped it open, and his blood went cold. Inside were surveillance photos of him. Shots of him running in the park. Pictures of him at his home. And at the bottom of the folder? A report from a private investigator. The summary was short, but chilling. Subject is ex-military. Highly trained. Connected to U.S. intelligence. Potential threat to Westbrook interests. Remove immediately. Marcus clenched his fists. This wasn't just about Becky anymore. Someone higher up wanted him gone. And they were willing to cross the line to make it happen. Confrontation. A noise behind him made Marcus turn, fast. Larkin stood in the doorway, gun in hand. Well, Larkin sneered. I was wondering when you'd come. Marcus kept his expression neutral. You've been watching me. Larkin smirked. Of course. You don't belong here, James. And powerful people want you gone. Marcus took a step closer. Who? Westbrook CEO? One of your old cop buddies? Larkin chuckled. Does it matter? You need to disappear. Marcus's eyes darkened. Not happening. Larkin cocked the gun. You sure about that? Marcus smirked. And before Larkin could react, Marcus moved. Fast. A single, well-aimed strike to Larkin's wrist sent the gun flying. Larkin barely had time to grunt in surprise before Marcus took him down in 3 precise moves. Larkin hit the ground hard, gasping for breath. Marcus crouched next to him. You made 2 mistakes, he said, his voice deadly calm. Larkin groaned. Yeah? What's the first? Marcus grabbed the surveillance photos and held them up. You thought I wouldn't find this. Larkin's face twisted. And the second? Marcus's grip tightened on Larkin's collar. You came after the wrong man. Larkin's eyes flickered with real fear. Marcus leaned in. Tell your bosses. I'm not leaving. And if they come at me again? He smiled, cold, calculated, dangerous. I'll come for them first. Larkin swallowed hard. Marcus stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked out. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot, the reckoning. The next morning, Marcus woke before dawn, the tension in his body wound tight like a coiled spring. Last night's confrontation with Terry Larkin had confirmed what he already suspected: someone powerful wanted him gone. But the question remained, who was pulling the strings? Larkin was just a middleman, a hired gun. The real power was sitting above him, watching from a distance, waiting to see if their threats had been enough to scare him off. They were about to learn the hard way that Marcus Daniels wasn't the type of man to back down. Gathering the pieces. Marcus spent the morning working his contacts. He called Jason first. "I need you to dig deeper into Westbrook Industries. I want to know everyone Larkin has ever worked for, especially in the executive branch." Jason grunted. "You thinking this goes straight to the top?" Marcus sighed. "If they're willing to send a guy like Larkin after me, then yeah. I'd bet money someone high up is pulling the strings." Jason's fingers clacked on a keyboard in the background. "All right. Give me a few hours." Next, Marcus made another call, this one to an old military friend, Noah Graves. Noah answered on the first ring. "Marcus. I was wondering when I'd hear from you." Marcus smirked. "Still keeping tabs on me, huh?" "You're hard to ignore," Noah replied. "What's going on?" Marcus leaned against his kitchen counter, watching the sunrise. "I need some persuasion tools." A short pause. "What kind?" Marcus's voice was cold. "The kind that makes people tell the truth." Noah chuckled. "I'll send you a care package." "Anything else?" Marcus exhaled. "Yeah. I need a favor." "Name it." Marcus's expression darkened. "I need dirt on Westbrook's CEO." Noah whistled low. "You're going after the big fish, huh?" "I'm tired of playing defense." Noah laughed. "That's the Marcus I know." Marcus smiled. "Damn right. The weak link." Hours later, Jason called back. "Got something." Marcus sat up. "Talk to me." Jason exhaled. "Westbrook CEO, Richard Callaway, is dirty. Real dirty. He's been laundering money through shell companies, and guess who helped cover it up?" Marcus's jaw clenched. "Larkin." "Bingo." Jason's voice was grim. "Larkin's not just his muscle. He's the guy who makes problems disappear." Marcus nodded to himself. "So that's why they wanted him gone. He was a problem. An uncontrollable variable. But now? Now he had leverage. The setup. Marcus knew he couldn't take down Callaway alone. So, he did what he did best, set a trap. He sent a message to Larkin. "Meet me at the Pines parking lot. Midnight." Larkin didn't respond. But Marcus knew he'd come. Men like Larkin always did. The showdown. Marcus arrived at the Pines, a secluded lot near the lake, just before midnight. He parked his car under a broken streetlight, keeping to the shadows. Minutes later, a black SUV rolled in. Larkin stepped out first, followed by two armed men. Marcus smirked. "They brought backup." "Good. You've got a lot of nerve calling me out here," Larkin growled. Marcus didn't move. "You work for Callaway. That means you clean up his messes. Tell me, Larkin, what happens when someone finds out he's been embezzling millions?" Larkin stiffened. "You don't know what you're talking about." Marcus chuckled. "I have bank records. Transfers. Offshore accounts. I even know where he stashes his unreported cash." Larkin's face paled. "You're bluffing." Marcus held up his phone. "Wanna bet?" Larkin's fingers twitched toward his gun. Marcus sighed. "Go ahead. Pull it. But the second you do, a very interesting email gets sent to the IRS, the FBI, and about a dozen major news outlets." Larkin hesitated. The two men behind him shifted uncomfortably. Marcus tilted his head. What do you think, boys? You really want to go to prison for Calloway? Because I guarantee he won't be protecting you when the feds come knocking. Larkin's men exchanged glances. Then, one of them turned and walked back to the SUV. The other followed. Larkin gritted his teeth. You don't know what you've done. Marcus stepped forward, his voice ice-cold. I know exactly what I've done. I just made you useless to your boss. And we both know what happens to men like you when they outlive their usefulness. Larkin's eyes darkened. You think this is over? Marcus smirked. No. I know it is. Then, he turned and walked away. Larkin didn't try to stop him. Because he knew the truth. The game was over. The aftermath. The next morning, the news broke. FBI raids Westbrook Industries. CEO under investigation for massive fraud scandal. Marcus watched the report with a satisfied smile. Calloway was finished. Larkin was nowhere to be found. And as for Becky Langston? She moved away 2 weeks later. Some people never learn. Marcus wasn't looking for gratitude. He didn't expect apologies. All he wanted was peace. And now? Now, he finally had it. For now.